Winner, welcome. Welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Sorcerer. What an honor. And honestly, so good to actually hear it from your side of the world.
And I just want to talk a little bit about how we originally met. We met at Burning Man 2019, and we were kind of emailing back and forth. I emailed you an outline this morning, and you responded with like a lot of thoughtful things about what you wanted to talk about. I'm like, oh, this is great. And I wanted to talk about how we met at Burning Man. And one of the things you said was something about my wizard hat. And I was like, oh, I'm going to put the wizard hat back on. I'm going to get the robe on. And because I'm not going to be able to wear it at any burns this year because of coronavirus and everything. So I'm like, you know what? This will give me some nostalgia and I can kind of remember what it was like being at that place. And I got to say, you really inspired me at Burning Man. You know, one of my favorite things was being the welcomers. Do you remember like welcoming
Yeah, I was like,
people?
I even saw your patch, your greeter's badge. I see you got on there.
Yeah, so I got the badge. Yep, I did it. Yeah. And but I remembered your energy of, welcoming people, and like this is their first like, interaction with anyone inside the gates is the greeters. And the greeters, and the way that you welcome people was just, you had the most energy and high energy. And I'm like, oh, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna be like that, and so like I tried to do that. So you inspired me to do that, and it was so much fun. And like I remember I think that's probably the most hugs I've ever given a stranger in a day, because you just hug everyone, and it's so much fun. And I remember I was walking around, it was like I was watching some DJ like deep playa all night, and I was like walking back. I was walking to the bathroom. I just got done with the bathroom, which was a huge line. It was a whole thing. But anyways, some lady's like, "Hey, sorcerer, you checked me in," and like, like, and she
Yay!
talked about that experience, and it's like, oh, I didn't remember because there's hundreds of people I checked in, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, or greeted, but anyways, and I just remembered your energy there, and then also just like I'm seeing the playa fashion show and everything, just like the energy that you had and carried with you is really inspiring. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you for that and that nice introduction. Because I'm going to be honest, a lot of times when I think about what I do at Burning Man, like I'm not one who usually starts like my own activities. I love volunteering and participating. So actually, you would like I admire like your admiration for like the things that I think just are so natural, like greeting people and like reciprocating the love that they're already giving you. I just kind of tap into it because you are actually someone who, even if it was like your first time, like jumped in and had a workshop. I've never even done that before. So just knowing that like in our camp, you created a space of like having people come in and realizing like what it means for them to like discover their own magic and have them have like their own experience of what it means to like have a potion of like apple cider vinegar, or just like share with other people like what is your animal that you relate to, and like having like little chants. Like you created a space out of nothingness, and I think that is magical because I'm someone, yes, that I think creates within spaces. But thank you for letting me know that you appreciate it, because that makes me feel really good.
Cool, awesome. And I think that and I really like that you really enjoyed the magic spell workshop that I did.
Playa, playa,
And
playa.
that was so much fun. And I had a lot of fun with I did that with a lot of people at Burning Man. Like when I meet them, I'd say my name's Sorcerer, and then I would they'd be like, Sorcerer. I'm like, yeah, I do magic spells. You want to do one? And we'd do a quick magic spell where we'd say playa, playa, playa. Those would be the magic words, and you'd envision, the person that you wanted to be in the future anytime you wanted to do it, right? And people really liked that, and I was just like, wow, that was cool, that was powerful, and like a lot of people really enjoyed it, and
Yeah.
and I think about that now, and I'm kind of on this like trend of consciousness hacking, and that's why I wanted to have you on the podcast, because you wrote a book, an amazing book, and I feel like and you I saw you had a post on Facebook like, hey, I finished this book, anyone want to read it? I'm like, yeah, I want to read the book. And then someone else sent me a book, and then I found a book that my wife and I started together last year. So it was like this whole like thing about the universe like pointing to like write a book, and like now you know people that are authors. How cool is that? And so I feel it's like kind of getting that's a consciousness hack in itself. I feel like getting these ideas out of your head onto paper in a creative way and sharing it with people.
Oh man, thank you for saying that, because I realize that maybe what we're really tapping into when we're talking about this consciousness is recognizing that energy just kind of comes to us. And at least with me, my intuition sometimes is not always in the right like direction. I don't always align with it, even though it helps me stay grounded, because like just knowing like when someone sees you, like you literally are just a source of magic. Like, I mean, just looking at like the wide brimmed like pointed hat, like even though I didn't know you when we first like were campmates, because technically our camps were camped together, it's realizing that like combining energy comes together, and like you literally have become a source of like what it means during everything with COVID-19 of like finding magic even in a world where we're kept within our own houses and like within our own confined spaces. So thank you for still having that be like a manifesting of like people being able to connect.
Cool. Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about writing a book. Like, why write a book? You know, it's something that I find doing it. And there's a quote, Kurt Vonnegut says that writing is like, when I'm writing, I feel like a man with no arms or legs with a crayon in his mouth.
Oh.
And I'm just like, I know what you mean, because now I'm trying to write this book, and it's just like I want to put my head to the wall.
Well, the short answer is I ran out of room in my journal. So, it's like everyone has their own journey for it, right? And so the way that I started with writing my book was actually after my first year at Burning Man in 2015. I had started doing journal entries specifically because like I started experiencing like real heartbreak. Like I had been out of college now. I had started a relationship for about a year and a half. This gentleman actually bought me my ticket to Burning Man, and then our relationship, for its own reasons, ended up splitting. And for like all these different reasons of why I'd always like journaled or why I'd always like documented my life, I was realizing that it was all kind of just like repeating, like, and I almost refused to see my own faults. But I also would find myself being mad at people for like not wanting to take the blame, wanting to put all the blame on me, but then not wanting to like talk about it so we could return to a state of being friends. So after I had all these like conversations and stuff, and me realizing within myself that there was something that I clearly was writing down on paper that I didn't want to see, the universe had me go to Burning Man. And within that week and a half that I was there, I kid you not, like I had more personal growth and self-worth of what it meant for me to expand within like my own self-love. And that was the biggest thing I think I was missing. I was so often trying to find like, how could I look good? How could I be good? How could I have people think I'm good? And as often as you think you want someone else to think that, you realize you're not allowing yourself to be that. Similar to what we were talking about, like egos and whatnot. Like so often when you're in your head, instead of just being with like the present, like I feel like I wasn't actually allowing myself to feel the hurt, feel the embarrassment, feel like the anger, because I was always trying to just have it look good. So at least for me, why I wrote a book is it pays my homage to just that personal challenge that you take to share why you are and why I am still struggling for this self-love through like this discovery where relationships are still important to me, but I still haven't given them the full ability to like air themselves out, not with other people, but just through myself, like for family, for friends, for my line of work. And then lastly, like my own identity. Cause I feel like, and I write about this more often than I have in the first book. Cause you said like write books. I actually am writing a 4-part series. It just happens to be one of 4. But the idea behind identity, like what I hope to gain out of this full series is to have people realize that everyone in your life, even if you want to write them off for forever or they have already passed on and gone to another realm, these little echoes that I have in this book are something that people have been letting me know that they relate to, because even though I'm a different person and I have different relationships, like these different shapes of the conversations happen in everyone's stages. So I wrote this book specifically because I want to complete my chapters, not just in the book, but through Sonder Light and what it means to go through completing with your family, your friends, what you want to do as your purpose of line of work in this universe, and then also finding your own identity. And a lot of that I call as self-discover me moments. And it happens in that order. You have to first admit that there's something maybe that you haven't seen in yourself, and then you express it. And some people do it in music, some people do it in podcasts, and I just happened to find that engineering wasn't right for me at the moment, so I switched to become an author, and I'm writing the book. So yeah.
Holy smokes. Something in there, all right, I want to respond to like 10 things that you said, but one thing in there, and maybe I should give I'll give a really quick synopsis of the book before, and I'll let you give your own synopsis. But like, yeah. I just, there's a quote that I wrote down earlier in preparation for this that really was a lot of what you just said. And so first of all, the book is Sonder Lives, or Sonder Lives.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Words are so funny in the English language.
And I love how you play with language in this book. That's one of the really cool things. Your mastery over language is amazing. Like, it's incredible. I feel like that guy with the crayon in his mouth, no arms, no legs. Like, I can't find the words, you know what I mean? But like, yours, the way that you play with language in this book is really cool. And all right, so here's the quote. And just I guess the quick synopsis is, Sonder is a Martian or Marsian that is amnesic. She's kind of coming to and like putting together her past life, and that's what kind of what the book is her memories and things like that. And so this is a quote that I really thought about while you were talking. Everything that is part of this universal cycle burns it brightly and unapologetically. From degeneration to regeneration, the flowing cycle continuously repeats, altering minute and minute bits and versions of history to make it unique for all versions of experience. And that's kind of like what you were saying right there. And then the key to discovering Lave is to find happiness within yourself.
Yes.
And yeah, that like when you were saying all that, I'm like, that really popped out, that thing that I just wrote down. And I wrote down just a couple of quotes, but that was one of them, right? So
yeah.
Anyway,
actually,
so
to follow up with that one, I believe Cassiopeia then asked after that, like, how can you find happiness within others if you can't find it within yourself?
Right. And so it's Cassiopeia, not Cassiopeia.
Yeah, well, again, and that it's funny because sometimes when I shorten her name to just Cassie, people will call it Casey, and it's I'm gonna be honest, the first time I had seen it spelled, I spelled it Cassiopeia. It's based on a star constellation that I've always seen my entire life.
The W.
I'm in the northern hemisphere, huh?
The W.
Yeah, yes. And she's got such a brilliant story, and I'm just like, why would anyone have a star constellation that is supposed to always be punished? I'm like, there has to be other side of her story. And so in this, people really wanted to think about it for a lot of Cassiopeia, or how did you say it? Cassiopeia?
Cassiopeia. That's the way I've always said it.
So at least for the idea behind this mother who literally is willing to sacrifice her own children. I mean, technically people could have seen it that way too in this book, although I have a clan that has nothing but Lave, and I'm just trying to share the story from her daughter's point of view, I guess you could say it. Because I feel like my mom relates with her a lot, at least within my family. So yeah, I thought it was fitting.
Cool. And then so you also mentioned that you were an engineer, and then you kind of completely changed your path and decided to become an author. How did that come about?
Glad you asked. So coming back from what had me even start writing this book, I had realized how many times I'd been in and out of relationships. And there was one relationship between the one in 2015 and me meeting Daniel when I moved out here in New York, or not moved out here in New York City. When I moved to New York City, I now live in Minnesota, where for the last like 5 years when I was an engineer, I had heavily put on myself this like 12-year-old's determination that when my parents got a divorce, I would never be put in a situation where I relied on someone else to take care of me. Because I saw what happened to my mom, like in the eyes of a 12-year-old, to go from like a household with like a dad who was a plastic surgeon, a mom who was stay at home, did like all the PTA stuff for like schools, and then got divorced. Like my 3 older sisters left with my dad, like 2 of them still don't even talk to my mom today. And then me and my little brother moving with my mom to Joshua Tree, which was just like so hectic at the time because like we were on welfare, we were with like my grandparents, and it was like such like a transition that like I made it in my mind I was never going to rely on anyone ever. And so I think I was just so headstrong, and like being in a career where I could do it all no matter what anyone said. And engineering, to be honest, it's one of those ones that it's like when people usually say like doctor, lawyer, engineer, like there's a reason engineer is one of those industries, because it's one of those ones that you have to put a lot of your life on the side if you're going to be successful in your career. And after working in Los Angeles on this light rail project in Crenshaw for like 3 years, I moved to New York, and within a couple months I had met Daniel, which I know you know Daniel. But
Yeah,
after
you guys are one of my favorite couples. You guys are awesome.
thank you so much. But like he had to put up with a lot of what Janine was still dealing with this 12-year-old struggling to like be everything of like independent, because I was given another opportunity that I didn't take, but I would have been in your neck of the woods, Sorcerer. It was a job for Walsh in their headquarters in Chicago, right outside of the Millennium Park. But I chose at that moment to like really ask Daniel, because at the time he'd only ever seen me like, this is how my typical day would go. So I'm like kind of backtracking of like why this was so relevant to me. But my typical day would be like I'd work out. It was so bad. I'd like work out at like 3:30 a.m. Like at least for like 40 minutes or so. If I didn't go to the gym, if I went to the gym, then it was like another hour. But like, and then I'd have to wake up even earlier, so it was insane. But I'd be ready out the door by like 5. I'd have to like ride the bus, get to work by like 6. My crews would be out in the field by 6:30. I would work all day. Like crews usually went home by like 3:30, doing all the paperwork and whatnot. If I was lucky, sometimes I get out like 5 or 5:30, and then another like hour commute back home. And it was just like, it was kind of draining on me. And at least for me, like I was okay to tough it out. Like this was like 3 years, like no more big deal than it had been when I was in Los Angeles. But this was the first time I had someone who I thought was actually really worth it. And so when I was talking to Daniel about going to Chicago for this next job, it kind of had like us have a real conversation. Like he would totally support me, but he didn't know if he could actually keep doing this, knowing that for as much time as he was spending away from his family and everything that he was doing to come see me sometimes, I wasn't really home. And so I really had like a hard contemplation at that point, because I started realizing like, who was I living my life for? And so it was interesting because it was in September. It's literally I had given up going to Burning Man because I was going to a wedding and all these other things, and at least for work they weren't going to give me the full 2 weeks off. So like I chose to go to the wedding, and when I came back, literally on September 11th, I had told my boss in 2018, I was like, I can't do this anymore. So I had stepped away from engineering because I was realizing that it was not aligning with the person that I wanted to be. As much as this 12-year-old wanted to hold on to like being that hard shell of just that perfect looking life and having like that career that everyone's like, oh, it's amazing, it sent you to New York City, I was willing to let go of this fear that like because you loved someone you could possibly lose your livelihood. And in that moment of knowing what Daniel meant to me and realizing what he means to me so much, especially in like 2020 during this quarantine, I am so glad I chose to step away from having that career be the reason that I wasn't living a life that actually aligned with the type of love I wanted to give. Nothing against engineers. I'm just saying I'm glad after 5 years I was really looking at it and realized that I no longer wanted to have majority of my day be spent in a cube, working on projects that for the most part were always going to be under construction, at least in here. So yeah.
Wow. Wow, I love that story. And, you know, I kind of had a similar thing.
Yeah.
I quit my job back in 2017, and it was like sort of on a whim. It was just like, I was just kind of butting heads with my boss, and I was like, and, you know, like, and it's just, it just didn't feel right, you know, and it was just,
Yeah.
so I was just like, you know what, I don't think this is really working for either of us, you know, and so I left. And then since then I worked on like a political campaign. I started my own startup, which wound up taking me to become the podcast host of CypherCon, and took me to Burning Man, and took me to meet you. So like, it's just, it's really interesting to see where like these places take us if you know, jump out and make that jump, you know. And so I've been like creatively employed for like the last 3 years, and it's been a journey. It's been a rush. So why write a sci-fi novel? Have you always been into sci-fi? I think I see a TARDIS behind you. Is that right?
Actually, this is all Daniel. Daniel is my doctor. I joke around that I am the TARDIS though, because I feel like I can make any space feel a lot bigger on the inside. Anyway, but I love creating spaces, and I think that's what had him find me. But no, it's interesting because at least for me, like my biggest pull towards like wanting to write specifically science fiction comes from like me really looking at what speculative fiction was. My biggest like homage, I guess I would pay to writing this book was like a mix between like the reality that I wanted the world to be when like I think my first, actually it's still funny because it's the first science fiction movie I'd ever like seen, and it's still my number one. If anyone ever like, yeah, Fifth Element
Oh, I
is my
love that
number
movie.
one. Yeah. Oh my gosh. And it's heartbreaking sometimes because I really do think that like at least for like the Fifth Element, I feel like that is one of the reasons that it's so big for these extraterrestrials trying to come to Earth and teach these humans love. And it's interesting because at least within that realm, the other thing that I really love about not necessarily science fiction was like the idea of like implementing different like tactics and stuff was Brave New World. So at least from a movie standpoint of like science fiction, I always see like Fifth Element. And then from like a writer's point of view, I look at Aldous Huxley with Brave New World. So yeah, it wasn't always science fiction in my mind. Again, like a lot of these, and if you read some of the excerpts, they are specifically from like my trips to like Zion or like conversations I've had with my brother. And then it just kind of worked out that I don't think Mauritians would look that different if they put on a skin suit. So yeah.
Zion National Park.
Yeah. Oh, it was
So,
the first, huh?
oh yeah. So how did that inspire the book?
At least for that, like I started having this conversation with myself. Like it was me I don't remember if I was in a relationship at this time, but it was me and my big sis, my big sorority sis, in my sorority. She had invited me with her partner and her brother, and his partner to go to Zion. Unfortunately, her brother's partner wasn't able to go. So like for a lot of the things, like we were tag teaming on them, and then her and her partner were like always like pretty much like it was almost like a couples thing, but it was funny because like at least for her brother Alex, his now husband wasn't able to be there. So it was interesting because like in one day, I remember one of my favorite hikes that we did Angel's Landing, which is about I think it's like 5.5 miles round trip. And then everyone else, like at the end, like they were like, oh, we're kind of tired. Maybe we'll go to like Weeping Rock. But no one wanted to go on Weeping Rock. So it was just me and Alex. But then me and Alex got to Weeping Rock and we're like, let's go to Observation Point. So I kid you not, in one day, we did Angel's Landing and then Observation Point. So like we did a half
Holy cow.
marathon and hikes alone.
And like Angel's Landing is like one of the most intense hikes there is. Like,
Oh my
that's an
God.
intense one itself. I haven't done it, but I've heard.
Have you done it yet, Sorcerer?
No, I have not done it. Like my wife's really afraid of heights, and like we've heard it's
Yeah.
like we did Half Dome, and
Oh, okay.
so and she was really scared of Half Dome, and I've been wanting to do Angel's Landing, and she was like, I don't know. And actually, well, she said she'd do it, but last time we went with her whole family,
Uh-huh.
and so we just, you know, it wasn't like one that everyone in the family would want to do, you know. So we did like
Yeah.
some easier hikes, right? So I do want to do it at some point. And the subway, I'd really like to do the
Yes, I
subway.
was gonna say the subway. Because after that, I think it's is it called Three Forks or whatnot? Like that also leads into it, but you have to do like a little bit of spelunking, but it's like very small. It's like maybe like a 15-foot wall. You just go on down, and most of the ropes are out there. But even for like small hikes like that, like I think that'd be like a good transition for like people who are afraid of heights. Because I
Oh,
used to
okay.
think I was afraid of heights. But then we started getting some of those things under our belt, so I didn't feel too bad about Angel's Landing.
Yeah, we thought we were gonna die in Zion. We went like we went to the Kalog Canyons, and we did like a
Yeah.
backpacking trip in there.
Mhm.
And the trail followed this dried up riverbed, and
Yeah.
we just kind of went on the dried up riverbed. We missed where the trail actually turned off, so we kept going down
Oh,
this dried up riverbed that turned into a canyon, and we started
yeah.
like sliding down these like 20-foot boulders, and we're like, there's no way we're getting back up, like it's not going to happen. So like hopefully we
Oh my
find where we're
God.
supposed to go. And so we kept going, and then we heard water. Eventually we're like, okay, we're camping by a river, so we find that river, we'll find the, and we did. So, but we were
Okay.
scared for a bit. There's like a rattlesnake that came across our path for a while, and we're like,
Oh my
this isn't a
God.
good sign. And so, anyways, we thought you were gonna die. But anyways, so you're in Zion, and you go from Angel's Landing all the way to Observation Point,
Yeah,
and
and it was interesting because like at least for a few of these hikes that we had done, and then total side note, but I'll talk to you later if you ever got to Needles, because if it was dry, maybe it was a good time to go there. But at least for me, like it was like the first time I'd really like had like those types of moments where it's like you're doing things that you never thought you were going to do. And I remember specifically when I got to Observation Point and like looking to the other side, I'm like, dang, like that is so bizarre that someone's standing on that side right now. Like, what are the odds that anyone else in the entire day started with Observation Point and then switched? And so I had like this weird feeling like, what if someone was doing exactly what I was doing, but like opposite? And again, this was before like I even wrote the book. I think I don't remember when we went on the trip. I think it was like 2013 or 2014, but it was before I even thought about writing a book. But I remember like I started writing down in my journal specifically about like having that feeling of like being in another place in the opposite time that someone else has done something. And then when we got to like the bottom of the trail, it was like we were waiting for the shuttle. It was just us two, so there was like no real like side conversation. That's one thing I love about like people who are willing to like travel with me, is realizing like I don't always talk this much. Sometimes I really do love just sitting with my thoughts. And so I was watching this receptacle, and like it was one of those ones that like had the locked hinge, but because there was so much trash, it wasn't closing. And I remember thinking like, gosh, when are like the rangers gonna get here and like clean this up? Like this isn't how like a park's supposed to be. Like this is before my immediacy or like any of my Burning Man tactics clicked in to like push it down myself. But I remember seeing like these overweight squirrels, and I'm like, gosh, like just get out of here. Like go back to nature. Like this is trash. Like don't do this. And I remember like literally after like that moment, like I had this thought, like, what if I was the squirrel? Because there's so many moments
oh,
like,
sure.
yeah, there's so many moments sometimes where I'm sitting there and I'm like, I'm vegging out and I could go for a run, or I'm sitting around and like scrolling on my phone, and I could be like talking to someone, and like in the moment of watching that squirrel, I'm like thinking like, gosh, you look, in my mind I was like, you look like a slob, like get out of here, like you're literally like scrounging for trash right now. Like that is one of the moments that happened in my book that I was just like what it would be like to actually switch the position. Because then the other thing that I felt really bad about, and I ended up cutting this whole part out because like I was like I wasn't ready to write it yet. We got back to our camp, and there were just like opposite of these fat squirrels, there was like these really like skinny, like gamey looking deer, and I just felt so bad. I'm like, even if they were like, I don't know, like sometimes I think about it, and like I think how often like as we're supposed to be like nomadic, right? Like how like we started as like hunter gatherers, we never like really stayed. Like when we create communities around these like natural environments where we come and go and we don't even think about it sometimes. And like, we'll get those extra snacks because it's just fun to munch on. Like, we literally create an environment for like the natural inhabitants sometimes to then become dependent on our stuff. And I was just like, I was having such a hard time after that, because at first I was like, oh, that's so cool, switch your position, and like, oh, I was talking so badly. But then when I saw like that deer, I was like, dang, like I don't want to switch positions anymore. Like I just want to, I want to have more of like a healthier type of like impact. And I hadn't been vegan yet. I don't even think I was vegetarian, but I started having those thoughts about what am I putting in my body. But yeah, so that's how that whole happened with Zion. Like, Zion was like a huge impact for me to realize like how often we can relate from like so far, like distance apart. And then I just started having these feelings. Maybe it was just like the hiking high, but I started really wanting to like switch positions with other things, not just humans. But yeah, that's how Zion played in on it.
That's
Sorry, that's a
interesting.
long answer.
And I like how hiking or hiking and traveling and like being in new places can kind of really change your thought process. I feel like
Oh
a lot of times when I'm out there doing something new or going in like Burning Man, for example, or going to and so we did a trip where we me and my wife, after we graduated college, we went and before we got way before we got married, we took a trip out west, and we went to like 11 different national parks, did like 8 different backpacking trips, and we did all this stuff. And that's when we went to the Club Canyons and almost felt like we were gonna die and all this. And but there's I was amazed at how much there was in the United States, and it really gets you thinking differently about things. And I feel like everyone should do that. Everyone should go travel, or even traveling, especially like in other cultures too. Like, we've lived in Honduras for a year, and doing that, like, in going to a place where you don't speak the language and you're kind of the outsider, and like trying to figure out, and like I'd always try to talk with my neighbors and stuff, and they would laugh at me because I was a silly gringo and all this kind of stuff. But it was and I think doing that gives you more perspective and gives you a way to, like you said, observe that other person and think about, did they do what we did in a different point? Or, or just, I think just empathizing with people and looking at things from a different perspective. I don't know. That's my thought when you're saying all that. I'm thinking about, yeah, that's really cool, because it gives you like this new perspective and gives you new ideas and gives you a spark of inspiration that you can write in a book. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And thank you for sharing that. Because, yeah, it is kind of a profound thing when you're actually able to empathize with something when you seriously have never actually experienced it. Like, in that case, it would just be like, oh, I sympathize. But no, like, I really do think as humans, we have the ability to empathize without actually experiencing it, which is just, again, that consciousness or that connection that we all already have. It's just we don't exercise it. And like these conversations, we don't usually have these conversations to realize how often this does happen. Yeah.
Yeah. So tell me about the book. I gave a little synopsis. That was my synopsis, but let me hear it from your angle.
Okay, so at least for me, it takes place following the new spacer recruits that have just come into the spacer program. And you are following Sonder Light, who is a Maresian from Mars. And she's about to go to Earth to complete her mission. But something happens that causes the Universal Nation to report that Sonder has been lost in an untimely explosion. Yes. So you follow her, like you had said, like after she wakes up with amnesia. And as soon as she does, she starts realizing that she's pixelated and she's being pretty much like, not accused, but being infiltrated for information that she can't collect. But as this infiltration for information starts happening, she starts realizing she has fragmented memories that haven't fully been understood even by her. So through all of this confusion, she starts to pursue her own self-discovery, which has her start uncovering hypocrisy that was hidden within her own spacer program, and within her own mission. So with all of this confusion and all of this need to seek clarity, you follow Sonder in what is going to start in an epic unfolding of her own discovery through what it means to be human. which I think is very important for everyone who lives on Earth, because as far as I know on Earth, we are human beings. So you get to experience it in what I call Sonder lives or Sonder lives, because as of right now in this book, you take place with Marisian, who is trying to explain to people that she is still alive, but maybe through the explanation of what it means to be alive, you start realizing how could any one person not be alive if we are all part of the Sonder lives.
Wow. That was a
Yeah.
much better synopsis than what I gave. So that's that's
Well, I gave 2 spoilers, so there you go.
so one of the things that you play with, and I mentioned before, is you play with language a lot, but also communication, and like the way that people communicate, people Martians or and not everyone's a Martian either. So like the way that they communicate is not always verbally. Sometimes it's telepathically. There's like 4 different versions that you had in there, and I remember the verbal, the telepathic, and then you have like in italics and underline, and you have different ways of explaining how they're actually communicating. And I thought that was really clever. And why? So what was the significance of that, and why did you do that? And also, I was wondering, why do Marsians even talk at all if they can just telepathically speak?
Thank you. I'm glad you asked that, because like at least in mine, so I'll answer your last question and then I'll work it backwards.
Okay.
The reason that Marsians actually do learn how to speak, and this goes through I forget which chapter it is, like chapter 4 or 5, Arian's lesson, who's her brother. It's because they want to blend in with us, because as far as we are as a human race, anything that is considered dangerous or unknown, for some reason we think it is great to just knock it out, experiment on it, take out its organs. So as much as they want to blend in. And so for them to learn not only how to speak the language, but also speak in American, because they are in America, which is very different than English. And I like that you had mentioned that, because sometimes I was playing around. Do I spell it like English, where they start spelling color with an OU, favorite with OU? I was like, no, I'll keep it a little bit less on that side. But the reason that they even bother with learning English and how to use the vocal communication is because they are here to help us get out, and to realize that one of the scariest things, for at least for me, like, and it's only interesting because like this actually is one of my biggest fears, is that I'm gonna get abducted by aliens and not get brought back. I, I, I don't even feel bad if people think it's weird, because I have looked it up, Sorcerer, and this is a huge fear that a lot of other people relate to. I will have you know. But no, that is a fear, because like same thing with people who play around with magic, like I shared with you, like I love the idea of magic, but I'm actually terrified of voodoo, because I don't know what it means when certain people are able to tap into things, and as long as you believe it, you are actually susceptible to it.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, like, it's how do you, as like a higher, not a higher power, but like someone who is more aware of how connected we are, connect with people who are only able to communicate. And one of the reasons I added this into this book, specifically these different types of ways of communicating, is, I said that kind of weird, the different ways of communicating, is realizing that I'm trying to practice it in my own light. Like I'm starting to meditate. I'm trying to practice astral projection. And the more I'm talking to people about these conversations that I used to never have as an engineer sitting in New York City, but I'm starting to find people who actually are able to relate with animals, and sometimes they're able to talk with me, and they can, it's the scariest thing, but it's also the coolest thing. And I hope other people who are listening to this actually do get experience this at least once in their lives. Like, there are people who can literally tell you what you are thinking, or like how you are experiencing certain things without you talking. And so just knowing that that is a possibility that humans carry within us, I'm like, how would it look if people were actually able to tap into this? So the way that I have these different types of like wording is like based on a normal book, people will see it as like verbal communication, and it'll just be in quotation marks. When people in the book start using telepathy, it's italicized but quotation marks. When there are another level of intercommunication where it's like a direct line. I'll do quotation marks, italicized, and underlined. And then there's this fourth kind, which I don't explain too much in this book yet, but I have it starting to be like recognized, is there's a fourth part, which is the inner intelligence. And it's when you're able to communicate with your own conversations as it's a separate entity. So that is like quotations, italicized, underlined, and bold, because as the books continue on, you'll see how this starts happening more and more frequently. But so often we are almost trained to like have conversations, but then as soon as you like go in your head and you start thinking these thoughts seem like they are you. And one thing that I'm so aware of now in meditation is realizing that our thoughts are not us. That is like the ego, that is our conversation. A lot of times it doesn't always tell us the best things either. A lot of times it goes into that fear chamber and just like tries to throw it all out. But the reason I have these different types of communications is like I want to start expressing myself in a way that people who are able to tap into these different types of communications understand that I I have awareness of it and I'm learning. I just don't understand how to do it just yet. So that's why I added it. And at least for Maresians, again, aliens are a little bit of a touchy subject for me, because same thing with like spirits and like ghosts and stuff. They've actually had a big role in my family. So for me, like it's not taboo when my mom says she grew up with a ghost in her house, or that she will see our past pets come visit her sometimes, even here in Stillwater, Minnesota. But it does freak me out to know that if those ever happen to me, I get freaked out. Like I'm okay hearing about other people's experiences, but as soon as it happens to me, Sorcerer, I do kind of go into like my don't take me away kind of feeling. So that's why I included in my book, at least for the communication.
Wow. Thanks for sharing all that. I love that, Janine. I was, you know, one of the things and one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is I've been going into like consciousness hacking and thinking about how, and the reason why I'm thinking about consciousness hacking is on my last podcast, we talked about uh, observing your thoughts. And Krishnamurti is a thinker that thinks about observing your thoughts and your own programming and how can you hack your own programming and realize it for what it is. And we're talking about it in the sense of, well, democracy. In order to have democracy, we got to have a well-informed public. It's like, well, who told you that? Like, why do you have to have that? It's like, well, I learned it in school. I learned this. I learned so you can trace it back to all these things that you learned externally, but like, do they really mean anything? And they're just like these constructs and these programs, and you can, and it's difficult to do, but you can, like through meditation, through thoughtful observation, you can look at your thoughts and look at your programming and figure out, well, and you don't even have to do anything with it. And that's what Krishnamurti, and that's the kind of the thing with Krishnamurti that I don't get, because he's just like talking about, you know, he's got a book called Freeing Yourself from the Known. And so that's on my reading list. And it's like that concept of there's this freedom when you're not attached to your thoughts and your knowledge and the way that the world works. You're a blank slate and you're wide open. And so I feel like there's these different ways that you can do that. And you're talking about, you know, playing around with astral projection. And I was telling you about, before we started, my sister's doing this shamanic journeying where she's going into these worlds that I think I'm going to have her on the podcast and talk about this too. You know, you can do that through drumming and putting yourself in a state. And we're living on like this very I don't know, basic level, and there's so much under the iceberg, I feel like, of consciousness. And so anyway, I love that you brought that up, and I love that you put all of this into your book, because you're exploring it, I'm exploring it as well. I don't know much of anything. Actually, that's one thing I know, is I don't know anything. And I think it's something that Socrates famously said. And it's cool. I love that concept. I love that you're exploring it through what's possible. Like there could be all these other different types of communication that we don't even know about. And I think
Yeah.
it's beautiful that you're able to express that so creativity, because I've never seen anything like that. Maybe it's out there, I don't know. But have you ever I was thinking about this. Actually, I'll let you respond if you want to respond first.
Okay.
Do you have, I mean, do you have anything that you wanted to say
No,
to that?
on it. Well, because it's only interesting because yes, we kind of talked about this a little bit before, but yeah, I need to reach out to your sister because like the other thing that I'm realizing specifically as like I'm sharing about this book is like the same reason why I'm like, okay, I'm glad I no longer just had these thoughts in my journal. Like this was the time for me to start having these types of conversations. And like the more I am, the more I'm finding like the little, because like that's another thing that I actually really liked is like on the back of my book, the quote was like, oh, what is life but an endless string of stories? Because so
Mm,
often like we just keep our stories to ourselves. It's only when we share them that we're able to echo it out. And as soon as you echo it out, like yes, maybe if you only say it once it won't come back, but the more you send it out, the more you'll start hearing the echoes return. And so
yes.
like yeah, so you sharing about your sister and sharing about these books and like now you like the Monroe like university, I'm like there's so many things like I am so glad I'm having these type of conversations and not just keeping it inside anymore. Like it is a really great thing to discover what humans are capable of when they actually do open up and start sharing to other universes. So no, I'm good because I already know where I have to go and now I know there's going to be a podcast. So
Cool. Yeah, it'll be whenever. Now she's doing some trail work in California, so she's like she's gone. She's off the grid for like a few months, so I probably won't
oh
get to it
really?
for a while. Yeah. But it's the Monroe Institute, and I'll put that in the show
Oh,
notes too.
institute.
And this was a thing that I have discovered about astral projection. Like, and actually, I had a guy on the podcast who mentioned shoot. So I had Richard Thiem on the podcast who actually did a lot of research on aliens and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And he wrote like one of the most scholarly books on aliens that are all about like Project Blue Book and the government's um, uh, their strategy to subvert like the the fact that like all of these like all these pilots in World War II all saw these crazy things, and they said, no, we're not going to share that with the public, and we're not going to share anything that's about UFOs with the public at all.
Yeah.
And so he wrote like this whole thing on like a book. A lot of it was on that, and a lot of it was on just UFOs in general. And he mentioned this guy, and I can't remember his name, but I looked him up, and he was one of the leaders in the Monroe Institute, and also used remote viewing in the military. And
Oh.
yeah, it's crazy. And I can't remember the guy's name, but I'll find it and send it to you. I'll put it in the show notes too, so you guys can find it too. But Monroe Institute is all about using like these different tones in your ears and your headphones that will get you to leave your body and be able to remote view. Astral projection and remote viewing, same different, same kind of concept. But like
Yeah.
the military was using this stuff, and like it's out there, and it's super interesting stuff. And it's not something that we don't explore this in school. We don't explore, these types of things, but they're real, and we can explore them. And I'm starting to be like, maybe I should go down these paths a little more because they're super interesting.
Yeah.
And so I'm so glad you brought all that up. So that's awesome. Hey, have you ever read the book Stranger in a Strange Land? There it is.
No.
It's a book about a Martian that comes to Earth to, well, wound up at Earth, and like all these Earthlings are
Okay.
like, there's a Martian here, and like, anyways, the protagonist like winds up like saving this Martian. They become water brothers. There's like this whole thing about water sharing and stuff. It's really interesting.
Oh.
You should check it out. It's by Robert Heinlein, and it's a fantastic book about, and it's a good one to Stranger
Stranger
in a
in a
Stranger in a Strange Land.
okay.
And I thought about it when I started reading your book, because it's similar in that concept where it's a good way to do a satire, taking an alien, looking at the human life. And it's like you looking at the squirrel and being like, oh, squirrel, don't do that. Please don't eat that
Yeah.
trash. Don't eat that trash. And no, I love that. I love that concept. Cool. So do you have any I invited you to share any of your favorite passages from the book. If you want to, do you have any that you want to share with us?
Okay, so I did have a few, but the one that stuck out the most specifically, because like, again, me paying homage to like the relationships that I've gone through and realizing what it means to let go. Actually, I did a podcast with this woman in Korea, Kate Emerald. She's amazing. And she was teaching me about uncoupling couples, and like it's the idea that when you come into like any type of relationships, and it doesn't have to just be like loving ones, but specifically this one was about marriage coupling. When you love someone but you no longer want to be with them, there's the idea that you love them so much that you want them to be happy going elsewhere. And granted, I didn't know it was called coupling and coupling until like I think it was like last week when I was on her podcast. But the passage that has been sticking out to me recently, specifically with like everything going on with like people feeling a certain way or being upset that other people are doing things in life. The one that sticks out to me is one that Lady Andromeda actually said to Sir Reginald. And so it goes, I mark you free from ever being deterred by another, by bestowing on to you an expression of unconditional bliss. To lave is to live is to flow is to give is to grow. In all of our moments, this we must know. Abracadabra. And the reason I like that one so much in my book, and I know other people will tell me like other ones that are very profound, like in at least like topical nature, like the reason I choose this one is it really for me was one of those expressions that when I was saying it, I'm saying it to like everyone I've ever been in a relationship with. Because for people who haven't read the book yet, the story of Lady Andromeda and Sir Reginald they are two shooting stars that literally are about to collide. But in that moment, it actually means that they'd be connected. But in my mind, I also have to think like, okay, even if you're connected, you're giant balls of fire flying through space. So you're going to collide and explode, which is also symbolic of Sonder. Anyway, and in this moment, as they're coming close, she actually says this because she realizes that if she were to collide with Sir Reginald, he would not continue forward. And for people who don't read it just yet, Reginald is actually being watched by the entire universe. And even though the entire universe is watching Reginald, he just wants to be with her, and she doesn't want to be the reason that he gets deterred by having his life be the legendary thing that it must become. And so she wants to leave him with unconditional bliss, because one thing that I have experienced with so many of my relationships is I would not be the person I am for Daniel Yanis Ford if it was not for all of those heartbreaks that I used to like hate myself for, or be so upset that they're no longer friendships, or be bitter towards the way that they ended, because everything has to happen the way it does. And the biggest thing that I realize about energy is it's not supposed to be stored, and it's not supposed to be contained. And so often I feel like people get in relationships where they feel like I have to stay with this person because I've spent so much time, or so many people are counting on me. But if you ever live your life for other people, knowing that you are actually sacrificing your own happiness, you aren't doing the justice that you want. Because what I'm finding now is like, what if you could find someone, and granted, this isn't speaking to anyone about saying, oh, you need to end your relationship. It's realizing like, what if you could find someone, and Sorcerer, like I give mad props to your relationship too, because like for someone to be able to go to Burning Man with a partner and then be like okay with it, like so much trust, so much unconditional love that you and your wife share. Because like that's how me and Daniel are. Because like there were moments when I almost didn't go to Peru. I almost didn't go to California. I almost didn't go to Burning Man that next year. But like it's realizing that if you're able to go on a path and you're so aligned with what your purpose is in this universe, I almost guarantee, at least in my mind and what I've experienced, is the universe will align you with someone who goes in the same path with you without you having to sacrifice anything. It actually makes you two a lot stronger to be able to go with your own love and find your flow and keep giving it, knowing that the more you give, the more you grow. And in those moments, we must all know that magic is all around us, and we should never have to feel like you have to give up anything in order to be with someone else. So if you can find your happiness to have those other people that you feel like you have to like sacrifice your life for, if you can find it in your heart to allow them to live whatever life it is by blessing them, unconditional happiness, even though you might not be the one that gives them that happiness, I promise you this universe has energy out there that will be aligned with you like tenfold. But yeah, that is one of my favorite quotes, because like I even end it with abracadabra because I'm like, I speak it. That is what it is.
I
So
love
yeah,
that.
that is my favorite passage.
I love that. And I love, I heard it recently said as, you know, it's the difference between a codependent relationship and a co-committed relationship.
Yes.
Where like the codependent is like, you're kind of tit for tat. Like you're watching like I had to watch the kids today. So I'm going to go hang out with my buddies and go golfing all weekend. And, you know, there's like this exchange, like I'm giving this thing up. So now I get to do this thing. Versus like in the co-committed one where it's like you're living for each other's happiness, for your own happiness, but also for each other's happiness. And so I love that. That's fantastic. And I did want to talk a little bit about, like, there was a passage that I found that I think is, you know, I've been doing these podcasts like during COVID and like every week the news is crazy different. And so it's like, so today's like June 2nd. And so we're in COVID and, you know, George Floyd was murdered last week. And, you know, all of the major cities in the United States are uprising, right? And it's just like people want justice. And I remember reading this passage and I was thinking about, and I asked you if you wanted to talk about this in the light of what's going on. And so I'll and you said that you would want to talk about it. And so the passage is, how can you justify if life on one side thinks that they're the only way when the other side is thinking the same? Justice is not the solution. Mercy is. And I was just like, wow. Wow. And I think, and you talk about that also within, I think after that passage, you talk about the war within worlds and the war within words. And that's just another. So can you just tell me a little bit about that kind of whole passage and that whole line of thinking, and maybe thinking about like, and you're in Minnesota, right? You're in Stillwater,
Yeah.
which is super close to Minneapolis, right? And
Yeah.
so maybe reflect on, if you could reflect on, you know, this passage in what's happening right now.
Yeah, and it is kind of crazy because again, like I didn't know a lot of this was going to be happening, even when I thought I was going to start writing this book, let alone going through the editing and getting it done. But I'm still so torn with like how Americans use language, because so often like the thing that always gets me in trouble, especially out here in Minnesota, is this idea behind sarcasm or passive aggressiveness, which again, I don't know how the media is portraying it all. But the way that I see it a lot of times, like our words really do shape our worlds. And specifically with wanting justice in certain areas of actions that have been taken. So like this coming from like an extraterrestrial who's trying to teach her children what it means to want justice, where the rest of the universe at this point, they don't have war anymore. So there isn't killing of your own kin. And they consider everyone kin. Like, yes, you have offspring, and yes, you have your guardians, but everyone is yins and yangs. Everyone is brothers and sisters. So when they see humans and we are just different colors, it is really abstract to them to think that they don't even come from different planets. It's literally the same planet. So how could you ever justify knowing that energy is just recycling, saying that I want justice for what had happened in a situation? And everyone, I love the idea behind it in certain cases, but then especially this last week, like I just feel so torn sometimes because I hear people wanting justice, and the way that the protests have been going, like they are like the ones that I've been part of, super peaceful. Like even in the situations where like we are standing outside of people's houses, and like where we're putting up like art around poles, or there are streamers, and it's just kind of profound, because like you hear all these different stories of like literally in the same city of George Floyd, where you didn't make it onto the news. You hear about these mothers who literally would go like months without hearing autopsy reports, or like being denied even knowing like where their loved ones are. And I hear the anger behind like the people who have lost loved ones, but then I'll see posters, or I'll see other posts about people saying kill. And I understand wanting people to have to go through like the justice system, and I understand people wanting them to be tried, and I do understand the idea of like the death sentence. But at the same time, like what I'm really recognizing is, as much, and that's why I love that passage, as much as we want it to be equal, what we really want, what I really believe humans want at the bottom of our hearts, is fairness. And realizing that if anyone were to be killed because someone else got killed, and I'm not saying people who have been killed should not get justice to what is owed, I just don't see how people can possibly, who are upset, say that the only justice is to then kill other people, because all you're gonna have is on the other side their mothers and their kids, and I know that not everyone sees people as equal, which is a whole taboo thing for me in general, because I don't understand. I came into this world with a black dad and a white mom. Like, I don't know, like it's hard for me to ever say that because someone got killed, because someone was very hurt in whatever they're going through, it justifies other people saying, I want them to be dead now too. Because I feel like that's what happens in humanity so often. We want what happened to be done to that person. And it's so easy to want that. And granted, I haven't lost someone like that, so I can only empathize for what it means to actually lose a loved one, when it comes to like not having it be felt like it was right. But if we can really come together and realize what humanity really wants is mercy, more than someone having to pay for the cost that they've already paid. Like, what if instead of wanting justice, we actually do find a way to have mercy on those people who did wrong, and have them come to the realization? Because the thing that I feel so strongly for, especially with like the idea, and I know not everyone agrees with it, but reincarnation. Because one of the biggest things that I do agree with this idea of energy, and however consciousness gets connected between like our nerves and everything that is around us, is energy cannot be created nor destroyed. So when someone, a literal life, is destroyed in a way that is hateful, hindering, or harmful to their families, to their loved ones, to their lives, to their own livelihood, I feel like when it gets recycled, it holds on to that hate, hindrance, or harm.
Yes.
And it just comes back in that same order. So what if, before we just decide to destroy something that literally has energy, what if we could find a way to have it become aware of why it feels a certain way? Because ending it isn't the solution. It's just going to come back. So what if, as humanity, we are able to discover what it means in reality to have us challenge why we feel justice means you have to end things. Justice isn't the end. Justice should be the beginning, and the beginning really starts with mercy. Yeah, so I don't know. I've been to a few of these protests now, and like I'm walking around these towns, and I am really like distraught, because like, granted, I've only been here since September of last year, but half of the places that are considered icons or like establishments for the people are burned down and destroyed. And like I see the anger, but at the same time, like I feel like where most of the hate is coming from that's destroying it isn't even from the city, isn't even from Minnesota. It's this idea that coming to someone else's place and causing more pain than what is actually even being even possible. It's almost like it wants to push it to a part where it's not even seeking justice. It's trying to, I don't even know what the word would be, sorcerer. Like I am kind of at a loss right now, but like it's just recognizing that if we are saying that we want justice and we are on a platform where people are coming together realizing how much pain it is, I don't know if the right thing to come right after that is to then want a broken system to be the reason it gets ended. Like the biggest thing that we need to discover is how can we have these types of reprimanding happen outside of the broken system? Because again, like from where I'm standing from and seeing some of these actions that authority are taking, I don't know if even if you put it in their hands, they would know what to do, because I don't think they know what anything looks like outside of their idea of justice.
Yeah,
Uh,
and
yeah.
yeah, thanks for sharing all that. Wow. I mean, and I think, you know, we have this really punitive justice system where, you know, we punish people for things instead of trying, versus like a restorative justice system where you try to, I mean, you don't, I mean, yeah, you hold people responsible, but you don't put the blame on them. You know that they're people, and people can make mistakes, and um, people can change, and people can get better. So I think a lot of it is within that criminal justice system itself, but then we also have this history. I mean, the United States has had just I mean, there's just a crazy long history of like all of this stuff that I mean, the racism has never gone away. And so if we don't acknowledge that, like we can't move past it. And these things keep happening over and over again. We're stuck on the same channel. So um yeah, thanks. I mean, thank you so much for sharing all that. And I think that you have just a ton of insight on this stuff. And I think um yeah, I mean, I think that I I I agree. I think that humans, I was just thinking too, like I just read, my wife was reading the book Just Mercy. Have you read this book?
No.
And it's about like death row and like all these people on death row, and they've been like, and a lot of them were on death row for a long time. And so this guy, I think it's the Innocence Project. No, he started a different project, but he worked with the Innocence Project. But basically getting people off death row that are innocent, and like just like all of the wrongs like within the system itself. Anyways, she, on our way back, we were up north for Memorial Day weekend, and on our way back, I read the last 32 pages to her, because like she's like, oh, I'm not gonna finish my book. I'm like, I'll read it to you in the car if you drive. So because
Yeah.
she can't read when she drives, so I read it to her. And one of the things that struck me at the end of the book, and I'm gonna spoiler, so if you want to read the book, don't listen to this part. But I guess it doesn't spoil it. But there's this lady that's sitting at the courthouse, and she's been going to all these court hearings with this guy who's an attorney that was getting all these people off. She gave him a big hug, and she called herself a what is she, a stone catcher, because all these people have stones. All these people that are fighting for justice have all these stones that are getting thrown at them. And she originally, I think uh her son was killed by somebody, and she didn't want the person that killed her son to get the death penalty. And so
No.
she went and consoled those families and caught those stones, and she caught these stones. And so she's like, it's hard being a stone catcher. And she hugged the attorney who's been catching these stones for like, this is his whole life project. Like he's
Yeah.
been trying to get people, and he's dealt with just like crazy injustices. And like that kind of weight just weighs on you, right? And so um I think about that, and she had the ability to forgive that person who killed her son, and like um make that other family like try to console them. And I was just like, wow, what a superhuman, right? And I feel like we need more superhumans. And I think that concept of what you're talking about is us being superhuman.
I like that. I like that term, superhuman.
So yeah, I mean, I think you know, we went through a lot here, and I think is there any other topics that you want to talk about? We had a bunch of other things that we could potentially continue to talk about, but I think that might be a good place to wrap up. But if you have any, what is that?
No, I think that's good. It's interesting though, because like I know, like you gave me like a bunch of like I'm gonna do this like as quick as I can, but I knew we were gonna have these types of organic like even our
Right.
conversation before we even got on the podcast.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but no, it's interesting because at least for me, like sometimes when I think about like what it means to like have conversations with people, and I think this is a really good note to end on, like realizing like how often we, and I consider like an echo chamber, because what I'm hearing, even like after I said what I said, I'm like, did I say anything that I'm going to regret later? Because like right now, like I am realizing it's such a sensitive type of conversation. And I like that you and your wife are people who are reading other people's stories and reaching out and asking people other things. Because one thing that I do realize, especially at this like time and like it being very touchy, because like it's not, I don't even want to call the word touchy, it's being real on subjects that people don't usually talk about, like the fact that we're able to talk about magic and aliens and the idea of forgiving people that most people would rather like cast to like the fire or have them be ridden of. And it's realizing that like someone, everyone who is on this planet started out as a child. This is, as far as I know, everyone started as a child. And as far as I know, children do not know hate. It is something that is taught. And more than that, what I'm discovering about people who look at one side or the next, like it's not an easy thing to ever admit that you're wrong. So imagine what it's like to know that you might be wrong when you were trying to do something
Mhm.
that I'd like to say they were doing their job, but at the same time realizing that they did something wrong, which was against what their job is, and now knowing how many people are angry at them. Like, what are the odds they're going to turn around and say, whoa, I'm wrong, I'm so sorry? So it's realizing sometimes like how human we can be in moments where we know we are unjust, but then also realizing that this thing about racism and this thing about authority and this thing about what is considered safe, like it is a really profound time that we're in, specifically now during this 2020 of our history books, because I have no idea what history is going to look like. I have no idea what is going to be taken from this time. But one thing that I do know is these types of conversations need to be had, because what if we are able to become that generation that is able to figure out how to have people who are so angry by the oppression or so upset at the system or not realizing what it would be like for everyone to actually experience equality on a level that isn't just within the government system or the governing systems. Because even before this, like, and it's kind of crazy, before this whole last month, like my biggest worry was actually happening with like what was actually going on with Corona. Like the fact that like that's not even a thing right now during these protests kind of does blow my mind, because it realizes, at least in my mind, it has me realize that like there are bigger things than me pretending, not pretending, that sounds bad. There's bigger things than me protecting what I'm actually staying inside for. And at the same time, like also realizing that it's not just what I'm staying inside for, it's what I'm standing up to in these types of moments. Because like we were talking about even before we got on to this podcast right now, is recognizing that like how much involvement do we actually have, knowing that a lot of our ways of communication right now have been like I don't want to say cut, but have been like lessened because we're not going out as much as we do. And so like I appreciate you as someone in my life, because Sorcerer, like there are so many things that are happening right now, like at least within my own self-discovery journey, that I'm not experiencing right now, because as much as I can, I'm following the rules, but then realizing how many rules are set that are not having everyone having their voices being heard.
Mm.
So I appreciate people like you who, even in moments like this, like you're literally like the virtual foot soldiers, like you're out there, you're making these conversations happen. So yeah, this is a good stopping point. And then at least for people out there in the CypherCon community, who are thinking about writing your books and having book ideas, if there is one thing I can give you, write down all the ideas that come to you, especially the ones that come out of nowhere, because it's important, like Sorcerer had mentioned, to catch those things. Like I might not be the person who's catching rocks for people who are unjustified or on death row, but I am definitely someone who is realizing that these questions and curiosities that people are having during these times, like they're not actually being talked about as much. And as much as I can, I'm trying to be that voice, because I realize that some of these messages that I felt like came to me like these last 5 years, like they are something that are coming out of me more than anything. And when people are reaching out to you as whatever writer you're going to become for them, because you are going to have people who are going to read your book, you are going to have people who are coming to you later with their book ideas. Get your ideas out as fast as you can. Worry about grammar, worry about editing later, because the one thing that you can really do is write a rough construct of whatever your scenes or points of view look like in your book without having it be finished later. Editors will help you, I promise. You'll find those people, because again, you're manifesting what you want to create in this world. And if you, like me, I'm not a music writer. I'm not a podcaster. I'm not an engineer anymore. I'm an author. So what I can do in these types of moments is write. And if you are interested in becoming that writer too, I hope this message reaches you, because like when I was writing this book, there are moments where you're writing a chapter and you might not know what you're going to put in that space, and it might come like a month or two later. Like when I was writing the commencement speech, I literally just put insert epic speech, and then I continued the rest of the chapter, knowing that it was going to come to me later. But there isn't any right way to start whatever project you're taking on. But if you are interested in having your words be turned into an external world, you want to get these thoughts out, you want to start having these types of discoveries within yourself because you're holding them on inside of you, get them out without feeling like it has to be perfect, because perfection, just like timelines, they're wibbly wobbly. They don't always look the best the first time through. But make sure you catch those ideas and you put them down, because if this world wants you to have them, it's because they want you to share them. Echo those out, wait till the echoes come back, and then just continue the process. But thank you, Sorcerer, for creating this platform for me. Thank you, CypherCon community, who is not only listening to this podcast, but also hopefully taking some insights with you as well in regards to what it means to have concepts and what it means to create a community of collaborative thinkers. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Winner. And then where can people find you if they want to see what you're up to? Where can they find your book?
Yeah, so as of right now, I only have it on one platform. I put it on Amazon. Again, you'll look up Sonder Lives or Sonder Lives. And the first one out is part H, Here Lies Sonder Light. It's available in both the Kindle and also the paperback. If you want to find me on Facebook, you can just find me. My name's right there, but Janine Watkins or Janine Ayana Watkins. I've got two Facebooks. You can ask me about it later. YouTube, I'm actually under Sonder * Light Lives. And on Instagram, you can find me at ninja_9INE. So Ninjanine. But yeah, I'm out on a couple different platforms on the internet, the social web, and at least on this, you can just keep rewatching this one podcast and just enjoy the soothing voice that kind of went in and out sometimes when emotions got hot.
Wow, all right. Thank you so much, Winner. And I appreciate you and you dropping all of your knowledge on us. And yeah, this has been a lot of fun. And yeah, thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Safe travels, stay open, be well, everyone.